Welcome back, and we're back for the second session of our commemoration. Just to briefly, I think let's start off by briefly recapping on the first session, as we had very fruitful and robust discussions around some of the issues pointed out by our speakers, Usongeza and Ozianda. And I think what they captured beautifully is just the model of commissions of inquiry. And, although commissions of inquiry are a powerful tool, as Wonile from the recommendations that are given from commissions, ingxaki though with commissions is that, they have a limitation. And that limitation is that recommendations are non-binding. So in the absence of, the political will to carry out as well recommendations and implement them, we find ourselves in, the situations that we are in today. Uzianda spoke about the issues around Marikana Commission of Inquiry and how there were very valuable findings there as well. And police went to have a cover up and escape accountability, and even in that instance, no one has been charged of perjury and held accountable. In that in that plan to try and in a way circumvent accountability for what happened on the day where we found 34 mine workers killed by police officers. Osongezo also just mentioned a point that in the absence of positive action from our state actors, we found ourselves in a situation that is dangerous, in that, as dangerous as the community taking the law into their own hands. Also, he just mentioned the role of the media in engaging state actors and demanding accountability. We saw issues of accountability from contributions made by our community members when they posed questions to Uzianda and Songezo, where one of the ladies that spoke expressed how someone in her family went missing, and she had to go as far as approaching social media to get the word out and to try find where her relative was. And these things, constantly show us that amapolisa are failing abantu. And the lack of implementation of these recommendations really has dire consequences to the people that live in our communities. So now we will be moving over to our second session. Our first speaker for this session is Unomzamo Zondo, and she is the Executive Director at CIRI. And she will also just provide insight into the historical context of policing in South African informal settlements. And I'm sure she will provide valuable insights and valuable knowledge to this discussion. Please continue engaging with us in our chat box, and we will be live at Philippi Village, and we'll continue to be live at Isivivana, where we will be taking questions from our viewers. So I would like to now allow. Okay, so we seem to be having some problems locating Unomzamo Zondo, but as soon as we find her on the line, we'll proceed. But I think perhaps what we can do in the meantime is just further reflect on the contributions made by community members through comments that was sent through, and through just the general feel of how the conversations have also gone online. We had members just expressing their disappointment that urhulumente only sees value in them. But between now and voting time, the government does not show interest in issues that affect abahlali. And I think we see this all throughout the country, where there seems to just be this trade-off between our government and our people, that it's only when they are needing the people's votes and when they're needing the masses that they recognize the value in the people of the country. And I think that's something that a frustration that we see amongst our people. And another issue that we noted from the previous discussion is concerns around amapolisa in the communities working along with criminals. We find amapolisa in informal settlements working with criminals. We find them, at times being the people committing these crimes. And so in like Apple, people struggle to then trust amapolisa. They struggle to trust that amapolisa can act in their interests. They struggle to approach amapolisa to report, because if you are reporting this to ipolisa that will handle your matter with care, or whether you are reporting this to umdo that's going to go back to the community at Tetengawa, which puts people's lives at risk. So I think we've unpacked and shown how complex the issue of policing is. And our previous speakers, Usongeza and Ozianda, have, I think beautifully laid out what we'll be speaking about this afternoon, and engagements from Unomzamo and Welcome, who is our second speaker, will, I'm sure, shed more light into the matter. We seem to have Unomzamo on the line, and I will be handing over to her to provide her insights into the historical context of policing in South African informal settlements. Welcome, Nomzamo.
Welcome, Tandogazi, so much. I think when I received the invitation from the SJC, I told them that I was so excited because it really helped me appease some guilt. Because when the Khayelitsha Commission was sitting, it sat at the same time as the Marikana Commission of Enquiry. And really, it was so important to kind of share how these two commissions could be happening in the very same country. In the Khayelitsha Commission, communities were complaining about neglect and insufficient attention from the police. While on the other side, the clients will represent the families and the miners who survived the Marikana massacre were complaining really about police heavy-handedness. And in the lead up to this event, I then came across a press statement from Abahlali baseMjondolo. And at the very end of that press statement, it said something that really jolted me. And it inspired me to think about what I wanted to say to everybody here. And really, I'm really grateful for this opportunity. And I'm just going to read the exact words that I saw on the press release by Abahlali baseMjondolo, which came out, I think, on the day that they wanted to, on the 6th of August, as they're celebrating Women's Day. And they said, and we will remember Zamekile Shangase from Asindao, who was murdered by the police on 29 July. This is 29 July 2021. And they say Thursday last week, when they came to break open people's shacks and size their food. And of course, this is a woman who's killed by the police on the year of the 65th anniversary of the Women's March. And for me, the word that really reached my heart was there. And it really took me back to these two commissions, the Khayelitsha Commission of Enquiry and the Marikana Commission of Enquiry. And I really had questions about what did they mean? Because surely the food that the police were seizing couldn't belong to them. So who was this there that Abahlali was referring to? And in looking at both the incidents of the Marikana Commission of Inquiry and Khayelitsha, it really speaks about how a lot of state resources are being set aside to secure, provide safety, provide comfort for a certain segment of the population, while the rest, of course, over millions of them are living in informal settlements, are sit in neglect. And while at the same time, at every moment when we see protests, we see police overhandedness. If we think about the Marikana incident itself, within 1 week, the police had been able to raise resources and they were able to bring forward 746 police officers to support them in the Marikana operation. And that's because their peace was in question, their wealth was in question. And they are managed to get police resources to stand on their side and ultimately lead us to a painful end to the lives of 34 miners and of course 10 others who died in the week before. But I've listened, I've been here for most of the morning, and I know that I've been asked to really speak to the role of commissions, and I've also been asked to speak about policing in informal settlements, and of course, the question of history is really important. And from the moment that Seri was instructed by the families of the deceased in Marikana, we were asked to ensure that truth is found. And in the Marikana Commission of Inquiry, as hard as it was on the families, as hard as it was on the victims, as hard as it was even on the legal representatives, one of the things that came out of it was truth. And truth that the families wouldn't have been able to get if they'd simply walked away from that very, very fateful incident. And I'm grateful because I'm here in the commemoration of a commission of inquiry that didn't start because of the deadliest exercise of force since the end of apartheid. But I'm here because communities stood up and said, we need more policing resources. We need actually better servicing by the police. We don't just want numbers, but we also want quality. But I want to share first, before we go more into policing, about why the Marikana Commission of Inquiry was important for the victims of that massacre, and specifically the families. And I think if I really address the issue of truth, there are things that the families were able to gain purely because they were participating in that commission of inquiry. Firstly, they learned openly about the fact that their loved ones didn't just die on the 16th of August, didn't just die in the scene that all of us saw in scene one, that police pursued and murdered, executed at least half of the murders done on the 16th of August in what would then be called scene two. They learned through participating in the commission that in the morning of the 16th of August, 2 hours before, the provincial commissioner would speak to the media and say, today we're going to end this, that the police had made a call to the Ministry of Health and requested mortuary vans, 4 mortuary vans, which would have carried 32 bodies. Unfortunately, by the end of that day, 34 people had passed away. They also learned through the commission of inquiry that 4,000 rounds of R5 assault rifles had been ordered by the police. And then, more importantly, they also learned specific information because of their participation in the commission. For instance, for them, their family, they learned that their husband, their brother, wouldn't have died if he had received first aid. That all that had been needed is that someone had to give him first aid as soon as he'd been injured. And at least if he received assistance within the hour, he would have survived. The Schalala family found out years after the commission that their father did not die in a hospital as reported in that commission, but actually died in a van in the back of police car. But because they participated in the commission and because evidence had to be collated about what really happened in that week, the families found out even trivial things about how the police had started the commission, having one Nyala, which is the basis upon which they could accuse the miners of attacking them. And because they were in the commission, they could actually show that Nyala drove into Marikana with the injuries that the police maintained in their exhibit to the commission of inquiry. There's things that are also most important, especially because we're talking here about collective action of communities. At the moment of the commission, the families could gather together as victims. They could start strategizing about their next steps. They could collect other people who would solidarize with them, who would fight with them for justice for Marikana. Most importantly, this was a time when they forced the state to speak about what it had done, to provide objective evidence that could be measured, maybe not today, maybe not in 10 years' time, but in 100 years' time, about who is really culpable for what happened in that week in Marikana. And it is, of course, I've heard people here continuously say, so what? We had the Marikana Commission of Inquiry. We had the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry, which was motivated by communities complaining about their lack of services. But how have things changed? And if I speak specifically in the component that Seri has been working on, which is on the policing of protest, things have generally become worse. We've seen the violent policing of the Fees Must Fall protests. We've seen the violence policing of service delivery protests across the country. We know that in 2020, IPID reported that 445 people died at the hands of the police, which means that every 20 hours of last year, the police killed someone. We then, all of us, were part of the lockdown, and we saw the heavy-handedness in the enforcement of the regulations. In fact, I remember speaking about how within a month of the lockdown, the first people that fell, they didn't fall or they didn't die because of COVID-19, but they died because of heavy-handed police enforcement. And it is then in asking that, fine, if we see you want to acknowledge the victory of having collected the information, you want to acknowledge the victory of having had commissions make recommendations on why we need more police officers in our communities, who are there to protect us. You have your recommendation from Farlam about how police should be policing, or managing crowds or managing protests. You've had, in July 2018, you've seen the release of a report, on how policing could be better. But we have all the recommendations, but we've seen no action from the police. What has really been happening? And we know, in relation to Marikana, we've seen a closing of ranks from the police. We know that even in the Khayelitsha Commission of Enquiry, the Ministry of Police litigated not to account to the community, not to come and tell their story about the allocation of resources in Khayelitsha. It delayed the commission by almost a year because it did not want to sit there. Of course, they could argue it's because the premier is from another party, it's because it's the Western Cape, it's because they think they're their own province. But the reality is, if it was important for the police to account to communities, it would have participated in that commission willingly, and then would have quickly seen changes in behavior, would have quickly seen changes in policy, trying to address the shortcomings that became open for all to see. I mean, with both with the Khayelitsha Commission Inquiry, we have a body of evidence that shows that we might as well be living pre-1994. That policing mainly secures suburbs and people in more affluent areas, and that despite the levels of crime in communities like Khayelitsha, the ratio between police and people is as high as 500 per person, whereas the rates in these affluent suburbs are much less, almost like 10 times less, or even more at times. And it's really, for me, it really brought questions about then how do we change things. I think this question about history, this is where it comes in. We know the police had been brought in to start to protect those who came from empire. Colonialism had started policing, and then even when both the Dutch, the Afrikaner, and the English amalgamated in 1913, again policing was about protecting their interests. To the extent that it's where I come from. There's a saying: we are vuyamfaza police, obukhwela phambili veni, which says that you must be happy what for policemen, because you always sit in the front of the police van. Because for many Black communities pre-apartheid, the police were a crucial arm in shutting down their dissent. They were a crucial arm in bringing to bear the might of the apartheid state. So there's been this enmity or ubuthi between the police and the people. And in the last 20 years, little has been done to end that enmity. Little has been done to bridge the gap between the police and communities. Instead, things have gotten worse. That when we have a commission like the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry, the police resource is not actually, we are here to serve. And if we are here to serve, we must account who we're serving. That there isn't a culture of service within the police. There isn't a culture of protecting the very communities that are complaining. We know that even within the police, even worse, in this culture of enmity, whenever communities have complained against the police, those have counted against them. The levels of accountability within the police are shocking. We know that APCOF produced a report which showed that if IPID manages to start a criminal investigation into a police officer, I think at the time it looked at a range of about 42,000 cases. and the conviction rate for police officers charged with crime is at a low 1.3%. And you might say, but the criminal justice system requires a much higher level of proof. They say you must prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Whereas if you are sitting maybe within an internal process of the SAPS, will be different. Unfortunately, the story is not much different there either. Where again, whenever police have been disciplined within SAPS, you see a conviction rate of about 3.2%. Now, this speaks to one, we experience, generally as South Africans, we experience our policing as violent. The communities that complained in the Commission of Inquiry also spoke about how they've been mistreated as complainants to the police, not as criminals, not as alleged perpetrators, but as victims. They've been mistreated by the police. Our general experience of the police are people who are violent and who do not care about the people that they're servicing. But we actually don't have a place where we can take our complaints. And for me, in what's important then in changing that picture is really changing that culture. It is about building trust. It's about the police building trust with communities. It is about making sure that people who are accused of untoward behavior, whether be it mistreating victims or mistreating accused people or people that are in detention, that if those people are reported, that at the very least we should see high levels of conviction, or at least a level that's acceptable. You know, we can say, okay, we can see what's going on here. Two, we sit in a position where right now, just as at the end of apartheid, there are there's the communities on one side and the police on the other side. To the extent that even if we have a resolution where the police start allocating enough numbers of police, let's say at least 1:40 or 1:100 for the community of Khayelitsha, we do not then fear that those police will abuse them. We do not then fear that when a mother calls the police because her 17-year-old son is misbehaving, that the police won't end up killing him. We need to get to a point where the culture of human rights is imbued in the police in such a way that we can then say, actually, those resources will start addressing our issues. They will start addressing our peace. They'll start addressing our safety. And we can be assured that then they will protect us. But there's such a long way to go in addressing that. So the panel of experts, which was asked to draw a report on crowd management and policing by the Farnham Commission, they finalized their report in July 2018. They handed them to the Minister of Police. The ministry sat on it for 2.5 years and only brought it out in March of this year because once again, the police had killed another civilian. But again, at that time, we were then being told, no, we have this report, we have considered it, we'll do something about it, move away. And I think here, what is important for us as communities, as activists, as people in civil society, is to then actually make loud calls for the government, for the ministry to take that report seriously, to actually create a policing that can protect us, a policing that can keep us safe. And unfortunately, the one thing that has been missing, as clearly as can be seen from the beginning of both commissions, has been the political will. And we know that for as long as there's no political will to change policing in this country, there's not much that can be done. But if we have a ministry of police that is serious about changing even the perception that citizens have about the police, we would see him taking the report the panel of experts gave him and turning it into policy. We would see him himself going to the Civilian Secretariat for Policing, for the police service, to say, look, we need you to hold us accountable. We want to implement the recommendations in this report. We want to change our policing. We want to get rid of the rotten potatoes. The people that mistreat women that have been raped, we don't want them in our service. The people that are corrupt, we don't want them in our service. And because of that, we are going to change all of these things. We're going to change the culture of impunity. We are going to end the culture of a blue silence. We're going to make sure that truth telling is an important part of the police, where everybody knows if I discharge my firearm anywhere, when I get back to my desk, I will write a back to office report explaining why exactly I discharged my firearm. When I receive a complaint about something that I did, I immediately want to account and say, actually, yes, I did meet this lady. This is what went wrong. If I'm wrong, again, I admit that I am wrong and submit to being disciplined. If the Ministry of Police can at least do those two things, then we would be going somewhere to changing the policing that we've seen in the last 20 years, which is actually a continuation of the policing that's been in this country since about the 1600s. And lastly, what I'm going to say is that we've had little oversight from Parliament over policing, despite the several complaints, despite the fact that Marikana marred our reputation as a country that respects human rights, despite the fact that the Khayelitsha Commission of Enquiry shows that the Black majority remains the least of the police's concerns. We haven't had an act to say actually we want a different policing. As those who once stood on the other side of protests, as those who once understood what it means to be on the back of a police van, we want a policing that is different. So I'm just going to close at this point to really say, if we are going to have any hopes of a policing that is going to make us feel safe, we actually need them to start by telling the truth, to build trust within communities. I mean, I haven't even spoken about what happened in July and what happened post-July, the raids that they've been carrying out in informal settlements, one of which caused the death of Mam Shangas. We do need a police that is going to try and pursue us as a community, that is going to try and convince us that they're here to serve us and not police us. Thank you very much. Tando?
Yes, Nomzamo, we're still here.
Sure, no, I'm ready to take questions now. That was the end of my presentation.
My apologies. We had a slight glitch in our transmission. I just have a question for you from my side, and then after that we'll proceed to Philippi Village based on just what you said about commissions of inquiry and them being about truth and uncovering truth. And my question is beyond that, beyond them being a fact-finding mission to establish truth and to establish facts. What other value do they hold beyond the establishment of truth? Because we know, inyani into engekhoyo with our government, and that they're very seldom accountable. And when they are accountable, it's when people demand the accountability, and then we get, the empty promises, and they start to give a bit of action, but then that is never followed through by policies. So beyond that, beyond the fact-finding mission and beyond uncovering truth, what value do commissions give us?
Thank you so much, Tandogas. I mean, and because I want to just give an example through the work that we've been doing around Marikana. One of the things that's clear on the actions of the police, right, is that many of them discharged their firearms or shot at minors who were surrendering. And of course, it's also very clear that they are guilty of killing the 34 minors that were killed on the 16th and even the 3 minors that were killed on the 13th. What the commission did after delivering the truth, when the commission ended, it was then left to the communities. It was left to the victims to say, what do we do with this? How do we demand accountability from the criminal justice system against these people? How do we make sure that we actually demand a change in how policing happens? So I think the families have continued to engage, not just by demanding that there's criminal accountability for what happened, but they've also continued to engage to say, we want different policing. we had hoped that the blood of our husbands, our sons, our brothers would have been the last to be spilled. It hasn't been. And we're gonna continue to pursue justice until that happens. So at the level of in terms of providing ammunition to the victims, the truth is useful. The truth and the commissions are useful at that level. But second, there's a very, very important aspect, which is the recordal of history. If anyone was thinking about Marikana in August 2012, and even many people are still stuck here, they would say, multi-crazed miners attacked the police, and that's why we're here. But we have a record, an objective record, that shows that that's not true. That today we can say, no, that's just not good enough. Here is objective evidence that shows that that's not what happened. For instance, at Seri, we've put all the exhibits in the Marikana Commission of Inquiry in a website that is accessible through our website. Everybody can go back and read the transcripts of the commission. They can go back and pull the evidence of the commission. They can go back and read the conversation between General Mbombo and Bernard Mukwena around what should happen the next day. That is objectively available because the commission is there. So in terms of even about memorialization and oral history, we have that because we had a commission. Thanks, Tando.
Ndinguthobile Funani, ndisuka ko-BM section eKhayelitsha. Xa kuthethwa i-Commission of Inquiry, apha engqondweni wam amaxesha amaninzi ndiye ndicinga into yoba mhlawumbi mna mntu wayekhona apha kwaSJC ngelaa xesha osekhona ngoku. It seems as if ingathi yafika kwiindlebe ezingavayo. Xa ujonga into ezininzi ezenzekayo ngakumbi kwi-area endihlala kuyo, this is too much and amapolisa akho involved. Point number one, uba sikhumbula kahle ayimentionile into yoba awakho trained for upatrola kwi-informal settlements. Okay, fine. I-crime is too much, informal settlements. But when it comes kusithiwa unesimokolo sakho okanye ishibhini, bayakwazi ungena kwi-informal settlements. They are too good for ukwenza le nto. But when it comes kusithiwa nasi esikolweni sisenza into ethile, sirobha sesithi na soza yazi direction yongena kwezo ndawo ezo. Okay, it's fine. Ucacile ke noba trainele kweli cala lokupatrol shipments only. Crime ayibeke ecaleni. Indenza ndingayifika mnandi because eyona nto sifeyisana nazo isikakhulu i-crime. Ububu unojonga kakhulu ko-BM usukela kulo last year uyotsho kulo nyaka, zininzi iimatters ezenzekileyo ngenxeni yoba abahlali bephakamile bazithathela umthetho ezandleni ngezizathu, because xa uripota into uyayiripota ayithathelwa ngqalelo, of which if ever ndiza kuwe ndi-expecte uba uzawunceda ungandincedi, uplan B uyazenzela nokwakho because uyazi noba le ndawo befama uncedala kuyo yile ungafumani uncedo kuyo. Zinzima ke zonto zo, kune-cases almost noba ziyi-3 ezenzekileyo zezeminyaka. Ubulawe umuntu yi-boyfriend yakhe, ufika amapolisa ambone oba ebebulawa yi-boyfriend yakhe, i-evidence ikhona, umuntu akabanjwa. Mna ndisukobanjwa ndinqandela umuntu olwa nomfazi nomyeni wakhe enext. Ndathi xa befikayo lo mapolisa lawo kum athi asikwazi uba sivule case okanye sibambe umntu apha because akho mntu ubhubhileyo. Ndathi ke mna okay, it's fine xa ungekho mntu ubhubhileyo, xa ucaba ke nawufuna uba makude kubekho umntu ubhubhileyo ndizawuthatha i-number plate le nasika evenini. Ndawalandela xa ndifikayo evenini endleleni athi sicela ukhwele uyovula inasika icase. Okay, fine, ndaqomba ndizoba na problem, ndiyayazi noba yinto lazayenza. Ndadlulisa ifoni yam, ndakhula ibhanti, ndangena evenini ngemva. Ufika kwawo wafika bhala istatement, ubhala wasi statement sawo, ndathi ngicela ubona, awandivumela andifake eziseleni. Following day andikhupha, undikhupha kwawo andikhupha endinika iphepha lento yoba mandobhatala ifine 50 rand because adibene nam endleleni ndinxilile. phofu bendiwabizile uba mawazonqanda ifight. Tell me aba bantu bayi-2 umntu nomyeni wakhe bazawulala boyi-2 sebehlabene already. That means kufuneka babulalane uze bakwazi uthatha inantsika serious. So I'm little bit worried man ngumcimbi we-Commission of Inquiry. Indlebe zawo ingathi azivakele incamncam. Enkosi.
Ndivile tatu ufunani ndimthetha ibuhlungu okokuqala into yoba nje butsho amapolisa akho nto akwaziyo uzenza ezi zisicinezelayo kodwa ezi zisikhululayo zinzima kubo and inzima le ndithethayo into yoba kude kufike kwisimo soba bade baxoke ngawe ubanjwe kodwa yenye yezinto kule report ethetha kakhulu into yoba kubalulekile into yoba la mapolisa angenanyani akhutshwe esipoliseni. Kubalulekile into yoba le i-IPID eyiyo mele uba iyafunisa ngento ezimbi ezenziwa ngamapolisa ifumane imali eyaneleyo but nayo yenze ngendlela ezawuphakamisa abantu abahlali baseMzantsi Afrika, yenze ngendlela ezawukwenelisa uba sibone uba nyhani xa amapolisa enze rongo ayatshutshiswa futhi nathi siphumelele. Not kule nto eyenzekayo ngoku yoba nje butsho uzawuphinda wena ukhompleyine loo complaint yakho iphele endleleni. And enye into ebaliweyo qolo ndizawugqibezela then ungabuza xa ndigqibile. Into ebalulekileyo ethethwa yile report ithetha into yoba kwisimo esifana nesakho unelungelo loba amapolisa ungayoma nawe ecourt uwasuwishe ngoba ekubambe ngaphandle komthetho. Kwezo case zinjalo ipesi karhulumente iba empty because even nathi eMarikana sisosha urhulumente ngoba abantu babo nabantu abafana nawe basosha urhulumente. Ithi imboniso esuka kwi-panel ithi amapolisa afunyanwe enetyala mabhatale ezibhotweni zabo idlule phaa kwi-treasury iyongena phakathi into endlini yakhe ayazi uba izawuba yigrosari yam ezawuthinteka. Ndiyabulela.
Lwensis, igama lam ngumtuzeli. Igama lam ngumtuzeli ifani ngoVika. Hlala eKhayelitsha ko-R side B. So just before ndithethe about umbuzo wam is that I think abantu abasenalo ithemba emapoliseni and amaxesha amaninzi yenye into ebangela uba kubekho into ye-vigilantism and also like the fear ekhoyo like ekuhlaleni like informal settlements about abantu sometimes ihlobo i-politician ezi-allocate ngalo. So sometimes even noba sibona case kunzima uyovula case because you can be robbed on your way uyovula case because ihlobo esihlala ngalo ke-informal settlements. So there are many instances where amapolisa athi umzekelo awakwazi ungena kwi-informal settlements because akho strato, because of indlela, because of infrastructure and other challenges and because of sometimes light but kumnyama. So my question to you is that if amapolisa awakwazi ungena kwindawo abantu abahlala kuzo, how much more for abantu abahlala phaa xa amapolisa kwawona esithi umzekelo uba asikwazi ungena because kumnyama because akho infrastructure. Now imagine now for people abahlala phaa, we have to face the challenges, we have to live in those conditions without the help of the police and knowing exactly what amapolisa have made themselves clear that abakwazi ungena phaa. So also okwesibini mhlambi what training amapolisa have that trains them to be able to police informal settlements, because it seems like training yabo was only was only made to police in the formal areas where the streets there's good lighting and everything, there's good infrastructure, but there was no training for police to police informal settlements because there's like pathways that are footpaths, there's no lights, and then in those conditions, what is the alternative for police to make sure they access these areas? Because the problem with that is that the police can easily access if there's someone who's selling liquor without license, and they can easily go and confiscate the liquor in that area, in that tavern, and they can even close the tavern. But whenever there's issues with crime or gender-based violence cases that are happening every day in the informal settlements, now there's come excuses that they cannot go inside, it's dark. So my question is around that. Thank you.
I mean, I think the first thing is, as I'm thinking back to what the Americans are saying right now, you know, they have a very interesting history with their police and especially Black Americans. And they are saying to defund the police and give the money to the communities. And I'm not sure that that's a solution, a complete solution for South Africa, but I think it's a solution that's important in the situation of Uguti. You can't say as the policeman, it's not safe for you to be there for 10 minutes on one day, probably twice or three times a year. But for somebody else, it's safe for them to be there 365 days a year. And therefore, it is important, outside of even of the policing, it's important that our informal settlements get upgraded. That's an important issue that contributes to policing. The costs of crime, the cost of violent crimes on communities should be counted in deciding what should be prioritized, about why it's important to make sure that informal settlements have roads, have lighting, have electricity, have access to water, because those things affect all of us. And you spoke about their training. I mean, unfortunately, one of the things that is a concern is that the focus of the police is not servicing communities. Because I believe that even if training was an issue, each station commander should say, I am in this area, in my area I have 4 informal settlements. What do I do differently to service them? The fact that I do not have roads, I've got so many walk paths, what do I do differently? I know that in the Khayelitsha Commission of Inquiry, there was this issue about when police, because police have to park far from where they are going, you need a third policeman to watch the police van. The police should be thinking about how to respond to the specific circumstances that we are in now, and then of course making sure that other departments, like about human settlements, are responding, and even municipalities are responding to make sure that the conditions in the informal settlement are livable and habitable for everyone, and then of course that it makes it also possible for police to intervene and quicker and safer for everyone to live there.
Thank you for that, Nomzamo. We have a question from Facebook, so I will just be posing that to you shortly. Uzandile is asking, what are the next steps and what can civil society do to get action from commissions?
Look, so I mean, the one thing that's very interesting in at least both the commissions that I've referred to, the Khayelitsha Commission, the Social Justice Coalition, and many other civil society organizations were involved, right? In the issue of Marikana, we have the Marikana Support Campaign, and it's really about mobilizing in those campaigns and in those groups to demand justice, to demand. So, for instance, if people are connected to people who are in parliament, making sure that parliamentary questions are being posed to the Ministry of Police about what are you doing about the Khayelitsha Commission's recommendations? When are you planning to implement them? What are you doing about the panel of experts report? Or when are you planning to implement them? When are you planning to change the unfair allocation of resources in policing? Making sure that pressure is coming from all angles, be it in community protests, in the media, in parliament, even going as far as to address the portfolio committee to say, you are sleeping on your job as the portfolio committee. There have been all these recommendations that could have moved South African policing along. What have you done to make sure that happens?
And a final question. Seri has done amazing work on the Marikana Commission. And, what can SJC learn from the work that you have done in order, in terms of holding the police accountable?
Sure. I think so someone commented to me a few days ago about how the one thing that's interesting about Seri's work on Marikana and on policing has been how consistent we have been. And I'm not saying, and I know that SJC has continued to fight on policing, but it's for the SJC, just like us, to understand that this is a long fight. We are fighting an institution that's over hundreds of years old. We are fighting to change something that has been in existence for 10 times the existence of SERI or 10 times or more the existence of SERI or the SJC. And it's been important, one, to center the voices of communities, but two, be consistent and follow up from all different angles. So in the work that we've been doing around Marikana, of course, taking our lead from the victims themselves, the families, we have pushed on different angles, pushing on the policing, pushing and raising questions about disciplinary action being taken against police that are involved, pushing the NPA on criminal prosecution for the minors. So we need to look at the people that are there. For instance, the Khayelitsha Commission of Enquiry, we had the Premier involved. We have the City of Cape Town involved. I know that there's issues about compliance with components of the recommendations that relate specific to the municipality. Again, it's just making sure that we're keeping every person that is responsible accountable.
Thank you so much for your time, Nomzamo, and your very insightful contributions to our discussion today. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now we'll be playing, bye. And now we'll be playing a short video from one of our community leaders.
Igama lami ndinguNosipho Zembe, ngihlala eKhayelitsha eSide B. Kwiminyaka egqithileyo kwaye kwafumaniseka ukuba iKhayelitsha iba nee-matters ezininzi. So kwaye kwenziwa i-Commission of Inquiry, abahlali baye baphakama. Saye saphakama singabahlali sagunyazisa i-Commission of Inquiry apho kuzokwenziwa uphando emapoliseni okokuba abahlali babephelelwe lithemba emapoliseni kwaye babethathela umthetho wabo ezandleni. So i-Commission of Inquiry iqhubile yanazo ne-recommendation which is iziphumo ezaphumayo. Kwafumaniseka into okokubana amapolisa awanazo i-resources okanye izixhobo ezaneleyo for ukulwa ubundlobongela, kwaye amapolisa awanayo i-training okanye uqeqesho lokuba mabangene ezimbacweni. So i-recommendations okanye izinto ezaphumayo kwi-Commission of Inquiry kwagunyaziswa into yokuba masiqwalaselwe ngurhulumente. Mna bendikwicandelo le-alcohol harm reduction kwi-recommendation ezathi zakhutshwa ngokube kusenziwa i-Commission of Inquiry ngabahlali baseKhayelitsha. Kuba safumaniseka into yokubana izimokolo ezingekho semthethweni zininzi kakhulu kwaye amapolisa awakwazi ukupolisa ezimbacweni kwaye abakwazi ukufikeleleka kwabo bantu, kwaye ke ngoku ubundlobongela obuninzi benzeka phakathi kunembacu. So sile team ye-alcohol harm reduction saceba into yokubana makubekho i-mobile police stations ezizoba kufutshane nendawo abantu abahlala kuzo ukuze abantu bangahambi umgama ukuyorepota. Kwaye ke ngoku saye safumaniseka enye i-challenge eyasadibana nayo istat izimokolo zivuka each and every day, so asikwazi ukuzibala izimokolo ezenzeka embacweni kwaye imbacu zixinene kakhulu. Imap yasembacweni ibingakwazi ukukhawunta kwa izindlu ingaba izindlu zengaphi na, because kuba nzima ukubala izindlu esembacweni. And ke ngoku kwaye kukhona le challenge ke ngokuba zivuka each and every day, ngoba umuntu uyakwazi ukuthengisa athi akathengisi but uyakuthengisa i-case eli-1 which is awukwazi lo muntu umbalela ngokubana uthengisa utywala ngoba uba nabo namhlanje ngomso angabi nabo. So izinto esasijongene nazo ezo sibelo qela le-alcohol harm reduction. Into esirhalelayo nesinqwenelayo asinqwenele mapolisa amaninzi azogcwalisa iKhayelitsha. Sifuna okanye sinqwenela amapolisa ane-experience ye-crime, not izitudents zamapolisa. Sifuna amapolisa anga kudala asabopoliseni akwezi ndawo zingenabundlobongela kakhulu. Umzekelo eMassey Point apho uyofumanisa ukuba ipolisa eli-1 lijongene ne-35 ye-cases, whereby apha eKhayelitsha ipolisa eli-1 lijongene nee-cases ezi-350 li-1. So alisoze likwazi ukukhupha elo polisa elo. So yile nto sithi sicela ugovernment ongeze ii-resources emapoliseni kwaye ongeze amapolisa azise amapolisa eKhayelitsha are well experienced.
Our next speaker is Welcome Makele, and he will be giving us a presentation on violence in informal settlements and also, the value of commissions of inquiry at a grassroots level. We'll welcome Mr. Makele shortly.
Okay, thank you. Sisi ngokundamkela kule presentation namhlanje emva kwemini. Basetshilo welcome kwaMakele. Ndihlala kwi-TRAs ezingase-OR Tambo Hall. Eyona nto isichaphazela kakhulu singabantu informal settlement. I-crime ne-violence yinto apha nje exhaphakileyo eyenzekayo nje yonke le mihla. Abantwana basothuki, but if ungajonga imiphumela yayo kubantwana bethu inobungozi kakhulu. Some abantwana ba-experience i-crime kuba beyibukela, abanye bayenzeka ezindlini, abanye yenzeka kubo. Xa uthe ke wachaphazeleka kwilwaphulomthetho okanye kwi-all-violent, ubonakala ngemiphumela emibi. Xa uthe ekuhlaleni ube ndlongondlongo, abantwana kubantu ohlala nabo uba ndlongondlongo, kwi-colleagues zakho, ii-friends zakho ekuhlaleni uba ndlongondlongo. Yindlela imiphumela emibi ye-violence kubantwana bethu nabantu abaphila phantsi kwayo. Ke thina apha eKhayelitsha ukuphila kwi-violence yinto esiyiphila yonke le mihla. Uvuka ubukela into ezi-violence. I-crime yinto nje ekufana uba siphila yona, ekunyanzelekileyo uba siphile phantsi kwayo, kodwa siyonto sasiphilela yona, sasivotela yona. But ke ngoku i-crime inemiphumela emibi kakhulu. Abantu abaninzi baye bakhawuleze babhubhe ngenxa yolwaphulomthetho esiphila phantsi kwalo, nge-violence ezenziwa emakhayeni wethu, nge-violence ezenzeka ezitratweni zethu. Abantu abatsha abathi ba-expozeke kwi-violence kumathuba amaninzi, ubabona xa benyuka kwi-age yokuba phaa ku-grade 4, 5, 6 baqale bafuna babhule esikolweni kuba ukhula endlini enobundlobongela kwistrato eziphila i-crime, apho sicinga uba izikrelemnqa likhayalazi indawo yophila, kunyanzelekile zikhona. I-violence ke ibachaphazela abantwana bethu ngendlela ezininzi, even abazali, indlela abatrita ngayo amakhosikazi ezindlini, obrada bethu, indlela abatrita ngayo ama-girlfriend wabo, ngendlela wawekhule ecinga utata wezinto erayithi, naye ukhula kwakhe afole kuloo nto leyo enze ubundlobongela. Akaneli ukubwenza ubundlobongela apha endlini, ude aphumele ngaphandle kwebantwini. If akabenzanga ubundlobongela siyonto acinga uba akenzanga nto erayithi. Abantwana abadibene nobundlobongela ba-experience i-crime, i-violent crime, ubabona nge-depression, abe ne-anxiety, i-post-traumatic disorder. Imiphumela yayo ke le ethubeni, ucinga umntana ukhule kakuhle kanti imchaphazela nto leya. Ithi ke ngolo nto leyo kwii-community zethu funa sibathathe abantwana, once babe-exposed kwezinto ezi, sibe ne-organization ezifana no-SJC or organization ezahlala phantsi abantwana zibancede bakwazi ufumana i-counselling, so that bangabuyeli benze ezaa nto zimbi kwiifemeli zabo. And indlela ukukhombesha abantwana abakhulela kwi-area esikuzo, iKhayelitsha ne-areas i-suburbs, uyambona umntana ukhula kamnandi, free kwi-violence. But umntana okukhulela apha kwiKhayelitsha, kwi-informal settlement zaseKhayelitsha, uthe khula nje, ukhula ephila ababomi kuba yinto ephila imihla ngemihla leyo, uyibukela yonke le mihla isenzeka. Ayonto imbi ke leyo, siye sicinge kanti izamchaphazela kwimzi wakhe sele okhile, aforce kwinto zonke, into azenzayo, uzawuabuse, either uzawuabuse substance. Kwipartner yakhe uzawuba ndlongondlongo, efemelini yakhe uzawuba kulaa mntu soloko enokuzwi lakhe engafuni umamela. Ngabantu abakhulele phambi kwe-violence leyo. Singanceda njani le violence kwi-community zethu? Ukuthi sifundise abantwana bethu ngendlela ubungozi enabo ngayo, kuba if ukhula kwi-violence ngoku mncinci, icace mgca, xa umdala uzawuphinda uyenze i-violence, noba uyenza endlini kowenu noba uyenza kwi-community, ngenxa yoba ukhulela phantsi kwayo, wade waqiniseka into yoba yinto efana ukwenziwa. Abantu ke ba-exposekileyo kwi-violence banamathuba amaninzi oabhyuza ipartner zabo, ingakumbi abangamadoda. Lo mntu obhinqileyo unamathuba amaninzi okuabhyuza ipartner yakhe. Le nto iyenzeka yinto ucinga uba le nto yinto efana uba iyenzeka. Kuneento ezifutshane ke unozijonga kancinci uthi izinto zethutyana neento ezinde eziafektha uba ubone i-violence kwii-community zethu. Xa sizama uadresa ke umcimbi we-violence as a public health issue, because if u-exposekile kwi-violence ukhula, uzawuend apha uneproblem either engqondweni or else uzawuba nee-injuries emzimbeni kuba ethubeni usenza le violence yakho uzawuhamba usenzakala, ubetha abantu. Nazi into esinofuneka ngoku leyo sizame ukunciphisa ngazo abantu bangabikho exposed kwi-violence kuba izawukhosta i-budget ye-Department of Health kakhulu, abe yena usabs epholile engawenzi umsebenzi wakhe. Now ndizama ukuthi i-violence zama siyilwe siyi-community ukwenzela into yokuba abantwana bethu bakhule bethe dundlu bephila ubomi njengabantwana abakhulele ezidolophini kwi-suburbs. If ujonga ukhompesha umntana ebebendishilo okhule kwi-suburbs, lo mntana okhulele kwi-community yethu ukumehluko omkhulu. Owethu ukhula nje ilanguage yakhe into ayithethayo imdaka kuba ukhulela koobhuti abadala noosisi abadala abasoloko bencokola nje bethetha nje izinto ezingabakhiyo abantwana, engaqondi umntu uba uzama utshabalalisa umntana ngento azenzayo. Xa ndizama ukongeza, if singancedisa siyi-community kwi-organization ezinjengo-SJC sizisapote ngendlela zonke, inene abantwana bethu ngakhula kamnandi, siyitshintshe le meko sizibona sesikuyo, sicinga uba sidalelwe kuyo, siyitshintshe le meko yokuphila kwabantu. Ndishiye kanye into e-violence. Xa ndiza kwii-commissions eziye zenziwe kwii-community zethu, sibethwa yi-ofisi kamongameli. I-ofisi kamongameli bayavumelana nee-ministers kukhutshwe nje dyarha imali ihambe ibheke kwi-community yagqitya ingalandelwa. Ukudyakazwa kwee-billions ze-commissions zibe zingazulandelelelwa ii-recommendations zazo lityala. Into ebekufanele uba siyayenza siyi-community, sincedisana nee-organizations like SJC. Uthatha urhulumente simse kudle, siqale ngopresident kuba kaloku upresident xa izawukhupha imali yokukwenza i-commission benyaka emi-7 ngoku, i-commission zange zalandela ii-recommendations zayo, zonke ii-findings zayo zijongwe zathi zafakwa kwi-archives. If uzawukhumbula kahle, u-SJC kwanayo umbhekisho wenzayo ngo-2014 after ezi recommendation, wavizitha zonke ezi offices, uqala kumasipala, kwi-ofisi kaDenplato, yanguPatricia Dele ngelaa xesha, waya kwi-ofisi kaPremier uMama Helen Zille, waya kwi-ofisi kaNathi Mthethwa amapolisa, ebanika again laa ncwadi ye-Commission of Enquiry, eza findings neza recommendations, ukwenzela weyazi ezibanazo phaa izawuba into egcinwa kwi-archives. Asibakhumbuza kahlali kwi-archives i-recommendation ziya-implementwa kwi-communities. Zibe njalo ke ii-commissions zenziwa zagqiba zithathwe ii-recommendations zazo ziyobekwa kwikhabhathi engaphantsi kuzo zonke, kube kuchithwe ii-billions zabarhafi belizwe. Now utshuthi ke ngoku abahlali abancedisane no-SJC nezinye ii-organization baphuthe i-pressure government ukwenzela uba kungadlalwa ngemali yabarhafi. Enkosi.
Siyabulela welcome for giving us those valuable insights. And I think into that we've left out of the conversation yethu namhlanje is abantwana and how environment of informal settlements and how ubundlobongela affects environment in which abantwana bethu grow up in, and how that trauma then affects abantwana and how they're able to express themselves and their feelings of safety within our communities. We've been encouraging you to send through your questions on our Facebook and on our YouTube page. Can you please continue to send those through? But in the meantime, what I will do is read some of your comments while we wait for community members in Philippi and in Sivana to come through with their questions. The first comment is from Ufuneka Soldat and Utiena. It said that SAPS and the City of Cape Town failed to implement the recommendations of the inquiry. And I think that has just been, the feeling of the day. And we are sitting in the year 2021, and we see is a karma of that failure to implement recommendations. Siyabona every time the Minister of Police gives crime statistics, crime in Cape Town keeps escalating. And the minister is not providing any policy reform, and he's not providing anything tangible that can give abantu baseKhayelitsha hope that the issues of ubundlobongela and violence within our communities will be resolved. Please continue to send through your questions. I'm not sure if our our audience members in Philippi are ready with questions that they would like to pose to Welcome, but let's sit tight and wait for those. Okay, it seems like there are no questions in Philippi Village, but there are questions in Isivana Center, and we'll be taking those very shortly.
Igama lami ngu-Eddie Nogwaxa, ngihlala SIB ku-RR. Ngizaqala kuqala ngicommente ngalo mcimbi we-gender based violence. Down question and uyibuza in terms of inansi commission of inquiry. Ndine question ndine comment kuqala kulo mcimbi abethetha ngawo umhlekazi we-gender based violence. Kwi-area sihlala kuzo, especially in former settlement, we've got the problems zabantu abakuyuzwa badly kwenantsika kwe-alcohol. The first thing, xa abantu most of the time kwi-families ufumanisa umama notata bayasela, yenza loo nto into yoba ngaba ba-end up abantwana sebeyibona imeko eyenziwa apha endlini yokuliwa, beyibone into ebalulekileyo uba xa iphuma ngaphandle abetha nabanye abantwana because uyifundele into isenziwa kokwabe ngaphakathi. Yenze loo nto ukhule umntana ekhula ekwimeko yoba ngaba nxa ibona omnye umntana oyintombazana abone into angakwazi uyibetha xa sebexabana, then ikhoze into yoba ngaba ke ngoku ethubeni ekukhuleni kwakhe seyinomfazi ufumanisa uba seyimbona as umntu angakwazi umbetha angazukwazi ukuzilwela kuye. That's the problem esi-experienceayo kwi-community zethu, especially in the black communities around South Africa as a whole. That is why sikwimeko today yokuba ngaba sibone abantu abangosisi okanye abantu abangomama beabuswa ngendlela ebuhlungu. It's because ezi zinto asizitithi kwasebantwaneni bethu ekukhuleni kwabo. It's very painful kwi-situation whereby uzawubona into yoba ngaba umzali abazali bobabini bakwimeko yoba ngaba bakwimeko yoba babe besilwa time and again. Loo nto is affect a lot of inantsika community. Lastly, kulo mcimbi we-commission, and I've got a question endinayo ethi ingaba ekusekweni kwezi commission time and again zide zisenzele ntoni na apha eSouth Africa, because we don't see into yoba ngaba kuthathwe mhlawumbi uMinister of Police okhoyo presently engazange abe yi-part and parcel yayo nayiphi na iforce ekhoyo eSouth Africa, uthathwa nje kwamntu kuthiwa mabe yi-minister, akazi kwenzeka ntoni kwapolice. And lastly, umcimbi wamapolisa, I don't know what criteria esetyenziswayo to employ amapolisa, because now kuthathwa i-criminal izoba lipolisa. What is going to do when the police are quite criminal? Because that is why in Khayelitsha, most of the time, we've got a police people that are involved in the crimes in the Western Cape. And London yenza into yoba ngaba thina sonke si end up singena trust emapoliseni because are criminals. Thank you.
Ndihlala eSite C. Andinambuzo kodwa nje i-comment. eSite C, i-crime i-over njena, iwari yethu ngabantwana. Kunemipu ekula Site C. Nomntana nabantwana bezikolo banale mipu. Nabo bakhuthuza ngemipu. Iwari yethu ngabantwana ke ngoku basakhulayo abancinci abangekayi ezikolweni bekhulela phantsi kwale mipu. Ingaba mhlawumbi le mipu xa inophando uba iphuma phi. Omhlawumbi sithi kuba siyazi into yoba imipu ihlala emapoliseni. Ngoku sithi ke thina ngoku la mapolisa inoba nawo anikeza aba bantu kule crime yawo iwenzayo, inikeza aba bantu ba mabahambe bakhuthuze ngale mipu. Ingase urhulumente asincede kakhulu for ukuphanda nje uba yimipu ephuma phi le ingaka. Imipu phambi koba ulale kutsho izithonga, ekuseni zizithonga. Asiphumlanga. Urhulumente makathathe amanyathelo simncedise no-SJC singabahlali ngoba u-SJC uyazama unako enze konke. Kufuneka simncedisile u-SJC. Inkosi.
Ndingusindi ke mna ke igama lam. Ndisuka kulaa new informal settlement akuthiwa izama impilo. Into endizawuthetha ngayo mna namhlanje it's about thina bantu bangoomama. Thina bantu bangoomama asisakhathalelekanga eMzantsi Afrika. Into eziba singakhathaleleki eMzantsi Afrika because umzekelo xana mna ndithi ndingumntu ongumama ne-problem kwam endlini, mandithi ndihlala notata kwam ndiyomripota mhlawumbi indlela andiphethe ngayo. Xa ndisiya epolice station ukuze ube kanti ndiyancedakala kulaa police station, funeke ipolisa lindibuze lifune inamba kum ndithandane nalo ukuze ube kanti ndiyancedakala. If andilinikanga funa uyazi uba ndiseriskini endlini, lizawufika lincokole kakuhle notata kwam lithi masiyeke le nto siyenzayo. Which means xa limkile ke ngoku ipolisa elo ndisheka lisengxakini mna. Abayazi noba ndizawusheka ndibulawa okanye ndizawusheka ndithinta. That's why ke i-crime ndicinga uba iya isanda eMzantsi Afrika because thina singabantu abangoomama asihoyakelanga. Number 2, ziba benditshilo ke ndathi ndisuke ezam impilo. Thina phayana eziba sayo occupy laa ndawo asikho free siyi-leadership yaphaa nabahlali baphaya because day by day sifumana izidumbu zabantu ezagrunjelwayo nezabulayo zayodanjwa phaa. 3 weeks back besinezidumbu ezithu besizifumene phaa siyi-leadership. Sathathwa isidundu sokuqala esesibini khange sithathwe. Kuye kafuneka into yobana sidibane nee-journalists zaKa-City Vision zazosaveya phaa but khakuphinde kubekho follow up. So siyacela ugovernment okanye umasipala akhayijongisise laa ndawo because eziba sasithilo iseninzi into ephaya. Asithi makasinike i-basic services but into yobana ayijonge laa ndawo ayisaveye noba kugrunjiwe kwenza indlela, ininzi into ephaya asezayifumana.
So siyamcela ugovernment akayijongisise laa ndawo because asonwabanga and nabantwana abancinci xa bezohamba umzekelo umntana uyozinceda ehlathini uzawuthi xinoni nethambo lomntu izamphilisa njani uzawukhula njani umntana ebone into embi kanjeya. So kulaa ndawo besicela umasipala akayijongisise into yalaa ndawo asithi makasinike ii-basic services but only into yoba ajonge laa ndawo zininzi izinto ezinofuneka phaa like izidumbu zabantu abantu ababefunwa kudala ziifemeli zabo. So siyamcela urhulumente ayijonge laa ndawo.
Okay, mandibulele kumaqabane athi anemibuzo kule ingxaki yokuqala phaa kubhuti Eddie singayivuma ingxaki thina abantu bakuthi thina abantu bamnyama ukusela utywala sibalekela etywaleni for ukwenza izinto ezimdaka and ukhule ke ngoku uyenza le nto kusela utywala idesk ibe lapha egazini kucinga uba wenza into erayithi njengendoda bekho laa nto yesiXhosa kuthiwa indoda funeka isele ofishe ngoku ayikho ayonyani leyo iye ichaphazele ke abantwana kuba umntana ukhulela kwifemeli e-violent uya ekugqibeleni aphethe sele njalo naye kuba ucinga uba le nto yenziwa ngutata nomama yinto ephucukileyo. Umcimbi wele criteria yokuqeshwa kwamapolisa ngethuba before iyilatsike sifuna i-commission sasivelele ku-government sathi before aqashwe amapolisa before abheke efieldini if bathathwa i-site C mayenziwe into kuziwe kwikhompyutha seKhayelitsha i-site C kubizwe wonke umhlali kubekwe ibhoksi phaa ukwenzela into yokuba umntu axele uba lona umthathayo ngokuya ebephaa esikolweni ebe-criminal naw asinakumvumela baphinde anyuke ayoba lipolisa. Yenziwa kanye ke loo leyo isenzelwa e-Andlemsizi zange ndiphinde ndiyibone maybe iye yandiskipha ke maybe iindaba ndizimameli yayise udladla wayekwazi uthetha nathi asibize yonke community zange ndiphinde ndiyive uba iyaqhubekeka na. That's why ke sinezi-criminals kuba siyabazi basuke esikolweni bezii-criminals abone uba eyona ndawo izawukhaze ndinike isalari kupolisa kuba ixesha lobo uba ndiyotreyina ndifumane imali ucala ukuba ndiye khona kanti uyokwenza phaa into zakhe eziza kwenza itshomi zaqhubekela ubundlobongela. Ndize kumcimbi wezi commissions. Ezi commissions ziyanceda phaa into ebethayo urhulumente wethu unendlebe but akeva unamehlo akaboni. If bekunokwenzeka xa ezawukhupha ezi millions for ezi commissions enze sure upresident yonke i-ministerial committee iyasilandela imali ekhutshwayo. Yingxaki eMzantsi Afrika imali iyakhutshwa ilandelelwa. That's why ke ezi commissions zisa ne-recommendation ziyofayilishwa kwi-filing cabinet esingazaziyo noba zikhona lapha kuloo office or ziphantsi komhlaba na. That's the problem esijongene nayo eMzantsi Afrika. La ithi ke ngoku i-community mayidibane incedisane ezi-NGOs so that zofayitha le nto urhulumente ongakhathaliyo. Kumcimbi kasisi uMamundela ye-crime e-site C nemipu ethe dlava ekufanele uba sibe nekhampeyini siyi-community ethi a gun-free society apho siyazi uba igani kwapolisa liphatha igani kwamntu wakho gani ofunyenwe negani ziyathathwa zonke kwenziwe ugqogqa kwendlu nendlu iza kwenziwa njani kuba la mapolisa acorrupt kwawona aswithile akungoku e-corrupted. Size kumama umcimbi we-GBV ngokomthetho kwi-police station zethu bekufanele into yokuba kune-victim support room zibhaliwe kuthiwa zikhona asizazi asebenzi kudala ke sisilwa uba abantu babathathwe babekwe ecaleni amanyelwe kuze i-social workers zimncede nothi ipolisa elingaqeqeshelwanga for i-GBV lizonceda i-GBV. Zinto efuneka ngokuthi siyadibana siyi-community sincedisane ezi-NGOs silweni urhulumente wethu makaqeshe abantu abawaziyo umsebenzi nothi abantu bazothatha isalari at the end of the day. Ndicinga uba ndivele yonke le mibuzo bebuziwe uba ndiwushiyile uyandixolela umntu ase ndimphendule andibambe ecaleni.
Siyabulela for imibuzo yenu and for contributions once again made by Welcome in addressing those questions. And I think into yathi qatha kum njengoba bekubuzwa lo mbuzo wemipu uba imipu ingena njani kwi-community zethu. Then ndacinga i-case of ipolisa a former colonel Chris Prinsloo. And in 2016, he was sentenced to more than 18 years and was found, on charges, over 20 charges. And he was found guilty of, bringing in 9 million rand worth of guns in informal settlements. So we really see that not only does the minister, fail to implement these recommendations, but when you look at the fact that Chris Prinsloo was sentenced to 18 years, but after 4 years, in 2020, he was out on parole. So we see that even within SAPS, there's accountability in terms of how they engage with such matters. So the issue of gun violence, Nazo, you can find a link in how Mapolisa contribute to the amount of guns that enter our communities. Ngoku will be linking to eFilipi Village, where we will be taking 2 questions from community members. So ndizanicela nibuze imibuzo yenu, and then Welcome will then address those.
Mandibulise kuwe Thandokazi ne-leaders. Mna andina-question as such, it's more of a comment or opinion. I believe ukuba there's something that thina singabantu basekuhlaleni that we are turning a blind eye on. Amapolisa most of the time batrayiniwe to do izinto bahambe nge-procedure ethile, of which ke ngoku abakwazi ukwenza izinto because bagayidwa yi-procedure. Mna I was hoping ubana thina singathi siyi-society yaseKhayelitsha, Philippi, including i-Mitchells Plain, because zii-areas ezifumanisayo ukubana high rate of crime. Senze at least into ebuku-petition whereby we challenge amapolisa, we write down ubana sifuna benze i-AEO so that bazoyazi xana betreyinwa ezi zinto zizoba zii-key bona kwi-training zabo. And then i-reality checks is that thina we are frustrated sisodwa kule society, into eyenza kubekho i-high rate yoba kubekho i-crime kwindawo esihlala kuzo. One, akho abantu abafumana imisebenzi, and then seyikhona imisebenzi kufuna ii-qualifications of which ke ngoku iindawo ethina esihlala kuzo imost abantwana badropha out esikolweni, umntana angabi naye ugrade 12, omnye akakho good like mentally, mhlawumbi ubhuti kumsebenzi wezandla, but asinazo iindawo whereby khona bazokwazi ufumana skills ezirayithi ukuze bakwazi ufumana umsebenzi. So zezinye zezinto ezo ekufuneka sizijongile singabahlali, singasoloko siblame amapolisa. Mna kukho i-system. First of all, if you are going to Khayelitsha, you are going to Mitchells Plain, you are going to eFilipi, ufike esipoliseni, you are being given one, and it's been years ngokuqeshwa amapolisa, but there's nothing eyenzekayo etshintshayo. So I think ke ngoku lapho thina bekusuppose siyangena uba kutheni soloko eyona nto suppose siyayitshalenja now ngabantu abafaka sikhe sibayeke amapolisa, because at the end of the day most abantwana abaqeshwayo esipoliseni ngabantwana grade 12. Then we have to see grade 12 ngumntana from age of 18 up to 20. Then they are only banika izithethe soba okay akwazi ucertify and how to handle i-gun. Ezinye izinto since sine-crimes abazitreyinelwanga ezangena esipoliseni because of umntana ufuna uba employed akwazi ukuthi yakhe aprofite for yona. So I think thina siyi-community we need to do i-petition, sibhale phantsi ubana amapolisa sifuna asiseve njani, and then ingapheleli apho, sisebenzisane thina nawo to make sure ubana le nto siyifunayo iyenzeka at the end of the year or at the end of the day. Ilapho.
Okay, mandibulele kusisi ngicomment yakhe. Umcimbi wamapolisa kwi-area esihlala kuzo unzima kakhulu. Kodwa ke sibambene as besitsho sizezi areas zilapha eNtshona Koloni, even uMzantsi Afrika wonke sibambane singakwazi uyilwa i-crime. Kodwa kuba omnye kwikona yakhe omnye kwikona yakhe, i-crime izawuthi dlava kuba asisebenzeli thungeni elinye. Loo nto ithi ke ngoku sizi-communities masihlale endaweni enye sisebenzeni kunye, then i-crime sizawukwazi noxa singazuyigqiba sizayizama kuba i-crime siphuma nayo ezindlini siyoyinkcenkceshela phaa ngaphandle. Now sisebenzisana ke i-crime singayilwa kwii-communities zethu. Enkosi.
Igama lam ndingufezeka Amashaya, ndisuka eHealth Bay.
Uthethe siyakuzwakali kakuhle.
Number one, into ezawuthetha ngayo ngamapolisa, into enye ngento edibanise namapolisa. Andikuzweli kahle nayo, okay. Igama lam ndifezeka Amashaya, ndisuka eHealth Bay. Ipointi yam izawuba ngathi sithetha into enye ngento edibane namapolisa. Thina sinayo ingxaki. Okokuqala, 2 weeks back uye kwakhona ubhuti ocholwayo ohlala apha ekuhlaleni, of which ke wonke umntu uyamazi loo bhuti into yoba ungumntu ongaphilanga, but wafunyanwa ngamapolisa. Ukufunyanwa kwakhe ngala mapolisa amapolisa into yoba athathe ividiyo lona amdorayize instead uba amncede azomnceda orayithi le nto bayenzayo. Kwakhona bamembathisa ingubo. Ekugqibeleni laa bhuti uye wona wakwazanga kumnceda. So ngoku eyona nto siyifa yiyo yile nto la ngala sihlala nawo ekuhlaleni, oyayazi yonke imeko yasekuhlaleni awakwazi ukusinceda ngeento ezininzi. Iyasibetha kakhulu loo nto leyo. Kudala ke sithetha ke nge-police station yethu. Ngoba loo bhuti lona
Okay, mandibulele kumama noxa kade mve into ebeyithetha kakhulu xesheni bemane iqhawuqhawuka bayide waqhawuka nangoku. Xa sinokubambisana masibuyele kuloo nto siphinde singabahlali sibambisane ubundlobongela kwiindawo esihlala kuzo singabulwa. Sibe nee-CPFs ezikuyaziyo i-community esihlala kuyo. Singabi nabantu bazawufika bazothi nkxu nje befuna ukwenza ezabo izinto kuba amanga abantu bayasinceda kwi-community zethu ngabantu abazisa ubundlobongela. Le nto ngathi ngokuqiniseke uba umntu othi kwi-CPF ungubani, usuka phi, yintoni imbanga azofuna uba i-CPF kule area yam. Ungamvumeli nje umntu kanti uzowunika umntu uzokongeza ubundlobongela kwi-area yakho. Ubone abantwana bengalawuleki kanti ecaleni usebenzisana nani ngapha ngasemva ubanyala iziyobisi. Singabahlali ke iyafuneka sazane senze le nto kuthiwa yi-mapping kwicommunity ehlala kuso. Wazi abantu bakwi-area yakho, wazi izikills abanazo, wenza sure i-area yakho uyayazi. If asizazi ezo nto ezo, ii-community zethu izawuba yingxaki. Wazi nekona eyingxaki kwi-area yakho, wazi nekona kuthengiswa izidakamizwa khona, so that uzokwazi uphinde uncede abantu. Now isingasebenzisa olo hlobo siyi-community singaya kude, but ke singazilibali ezi organizations zikhoyo kwi-society yethu, sisebenzisane nazo. Zona into ezasinceda ngako usinike i-research. Siya kubo ucele basenzele research kwinto ethile, then ke ngosenza into siqinisekile ukuba ijongiwe lo mntu besijongela yona uqinisekile ngayo, then ungabona singaphila kubomi ukanti sihlala kwii-suburbs ngokuhlala kwi-informal settlement. Enkosi.
And we have come to the end of our program today. We would like to thank the community members at Philippi for those questions, and we would like to thank our speaker, Welcome Makele. We also would like to give a huge thank you as Social Justice Coalition to our speakers today, Usongezo Mabece, Ziyanda Sturman, Nomzamo Zondo, and Welcome Makele. We also want to thank the communities at our 2 streaming venues in Philippi Village and Isavivana Center. And we would also like to thank you at home for joining us and engaging on these very important discussions today around policing in informal settlements and the lack of implementation of recommendations from commissions of inquiry. Ithemba lethu is that, ngeli xesha lonyaka uzayo we will be telling a different story, a story of change, a story where the police has, started to take accountability, that the police are firstly acknowledging the crisis in policing across South Africa. And in the meantime, we would like to encourage you to keep engaging the media, engaging civil society, that we don't get tired of demanding accountability and demanding safe settlement, safe homes, and that we keep trying to improve access to justice for people that particularly live in informal settlements and are more prone to violence. Lastly, we want to thank you again for engaging, and we're hoping that next year we will have more to discuss, more to engage. And as Nomzamo said, the key is to keep engaging. The key is to not get tired and to keep interrogating and holding, our government to account. On that note, I would like to wish you a great day further, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.